Hi guys, this is Jason Coombs with Brick House Recovery TV, and this is your insider's look at the TED Talk, the viral TED Talk, Everything You Think You Know About Addiction is Wrong. The reason why I want to do an insider's look at this particular TED Talk is, number one, it's viral and it's also pretty controversial. I personally found a lot of value in watching this message, and I'm going to dissect a few points that I think, from an insider's perspective, being on both sides of the spectrum, can offer some value in how I perceive it. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about and get into are derived from a couple of quotes that I found to be very valuable within this TED Talk.
But Professor Alexander began to think there might be a different story about addiction. He said, what if addiction isn't about your chemical hooks? What if addiction is about your cage? What if addiction is an adaptation to your environment? Looking at this, there was another professor called Peter Cohen in the Netherlands who said, maybe we shouldn't even call it addiction. Maybe we should call it bonding.
And the reason why I found this to be so powerful, because it aligns with Jim Rohn's quote, "We are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with." And for me personally, this was my experience. In my first treatment center, I went in there a non-smoker. I didn't have the habits that I came out with, but my surroundings, they really did play a part in who I eventually became. And so while I was in there, I was surrounded by people who didn't want to get sober. They didn't want to change. They were there because they were court mandated by the judge. And that affected me, you know, as I was in early sobriety, trying to find my way of whether or not being sober was worth it or not. The surrounding of who I was around really did sway me the opposite direction. I became a smoker, which, look, there's no judgment there. I smoked for many years. But it was something that I picked up in treatment around the people that I was around. The first time I ever tried meth was in with those guys. The first time I ever tried heroin or put a needle in my arm was because I was surrounded by people who thought that was okay and they welcomed it. So this point that Mr. Hari makes in the video struck a chord with me, because I do think, to some degree, addiction is bred based on our environment or our cage. And if we're around healthy people, we're going to be the average of those 5 people. If we're around negative people and toxic people, we're going to become the average of those 5 people. All right, so the main point that I want to get across is inviting you to take a step back and look at your own environment. And look at the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Are they helping you, or are they hurting you? Are they toxic, or are they healthy? Do they know what you're going through, and do you trust them with your innermost struggles? Or do you have to keep things back? Furthermore, I want you to also look at your addicted loved one's environment. And are you one of the 5 people in his life or her life? And are you contributing to the problem, or are you helping? And only you can answer that question, but I want you to consider that. So the second thing I want to talk about is the power of influence. And what I mean by that is there's a particular quote also in this TED Talk that stuck out to me. And Mr. Hari says,
is to say to the addicts in my life that I want to deepen the connection with them, to say to them, I love you whether you're using or you're not. I love you whatever state you're in. And if you need me, I'll come and sit with you, because I love you and I don't want you to be alone or to feel alone.
And this advice is the advice I give to you. Now, that doesn't mean that love is conditional. What it means is that love is unconditional, no strings attached. Whether they're using or whether they're not using, you still demonstrate love. Why is this important? Well, if you show unconditional, no strings attached love to someone who's addicted, first of all, you're going to feel, give them the sense and the feeling of trust. And you have to have trust before you can begin to influence. And love is the power of influence. So the third thing that I want to talk about, and probably the most quoted part of this particular TED Talk, is when he said,
because the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Thank you.
This is a debated claim all over the internet. And I, from my insider's look and from being on both sides of the fence, he's right, but he's also missing a very critical and important component. This particular quote means to someone who's never suffered with an addiction is that sobriety shouldn't be the goal, but really the cure is going to come through connection. But what does that really mean? Some argue that sobriety is connection. So in their view, Mr. Hari is incorrect. I just want to strip away all of the debate and just give you the truth, which is very clean cut and very understandable in layman's terms. So there is a difference between sobriety, which is just being clean and sober, and recovery. Recovery is where you're emotionally healthy, where you are mentally healthy, and you have returned to a state of mind, body, and spirit that is in a non-toxic, recovered state. So the difference between being clean and being in recovery is very important to make, because a lot of people can get sober. You know, if you punch a police officer, you'll go to jail and they'll force you to get sober. But does that mean that you're in recovery? No, it doesn't. Because when I was locked up in jail, I still had a sick brain. I was still fantasizing all the time about using. In fact, the conversations that I would have with the other inmates were all about different ways, new ways that we could use and new drugs that we could try. And we found new drug dealers in jail. So that's not recovery, although I was not ingesting any drugs or any alcohol ever. Then when I got released, I went back to using. So sobriety isn't lasting, and that's the piece that he's really missing here. Recovery, though, is lasting. Long-term sobriety, to me, equals recovery. So those words can be interchangeable. Long-term sobriety, person in long-term recovery, those are interchangeable to me. And what that means is when I finally connected, for me that was connecting with God, that was connecting with other people, that was connecting with myself and developing a healthy relationship with myself and not hating myself all the time. Those connections are actually the opposite of addiction. So in that sense, Hari is right. So you can see how both sides of the coin, there's a debate, there's an argument, but it's all semantics. I mean, what matters is, are you healthy in recovery? And the question, or the answer to that, is whether you are happy and sober or whether you're miserable and sober, because there is a big difference. I found this TED Talk to be very powerful. I share it with my clients, I share it with their family members, because it is a resource. And I think that he's very articulate and delivers the message clean and pure. Sure, there are areas that I could add to or debate or take away, but look, I've given a TEDx talk. I know what it's like to stand up there and to feel the pressure, and nobody's ever going to be perfect from the stage. So I give the guy a break, and I thought he did a phenomenal job. And I encourage you to take a look at it, watch it, because it's going to help you, and it's also going to help your addicted loved one if you pull out the nuggets that are going to help. But you better understand addiction and what you're up against. All right, you guys, so if you like this video, you're going to want to do 3 things. Number 1, go ahead and subscribe to Brickhouse Recovery TV. Number 2, like this video. And number 3, leave a comment behind. This channel is for the viewers. We put out premium content each and every week, so go ahead and leave a comment behind. Also, if you are new to Brickhouse Recovery TV, don't forget to pick up your free copy to my 7-day Road to Recovery challenge. So in just 7 days, this challenge is going to help you and your addicted loved one in leaps and bounds. It's going to drastically change how you feel inside and your level of happiness. So don't forget to go ahead and click the link below in the description to pick up your free copy today. My name is Jason Coombs with Brickhouse Recovery TV, and just remember, it's about progress, not perfection.